Welcome to a very exciting episode on AI and consciousness. Together with me here today with Chad Woodford, who is an amazing man. He is a philosopher. He is an AI lawyer. He went to India and studied philosophy, Vedic philosophy, yoga, and meditation, and brought that back to the West. And then went into Silicon Valley, where recently I heard him speak about the trap we're all walking into, which is the transhumanist belief that AI will become super intelligent, super conscious, and may already be conscious. And that's what he brought back from that event, that retreat. And I'm going to ask him that as the first question. And then also unpacking what we can do as humans to be protected against the onslaught and I would say, the seduction of AI, which will become more capable than many of us humans, with an IQ so much higher, so much faster. However, lacking what we have that makes us human, but makes us super conscious. And that will be what we'll talk about today. His background is now as an AI lawyer. Mind you, he is steeped in the development of computer and technology. And with his spiritual teachings now based in Los Angeles, working to create a technology world, a future in which we are more human-centered instead of technology-centered, where we create a technology that serves humanity. He has a variety of experiences spanning the artificial intelligence world, as well as the ancient wisdom world that he was trained in from India, in India. And he also carries a Master of Philosophy, Cosmology, and Consciousness from the University of CIIS, and bringing this multifaceted perspective, the intersection of technology, consciousness, into the human potential movement to help create laws and ethical developments within AI to create a more human-centric future. He is also saying that we need to be aware of the pitfalls of how technology may seduce us into an awareness that it appears as sentient and conscious. And his approach is body-centered wisdom, that love comes from the heart and not from a machine. And his vision is, with his work, his interviews, his views on technology, to bring people in and onto the platform of developing technology that creates a world in which technology serves humans, and humans become more comfortable with their emotions, with freeing themselves of their past, their conditionings, their belief systems that have held them back, and where unity is a common experience, as well as joy, and I call it living in heaven on earth. He strives with his work to bring human qualities such as human imagination, intuition, back to the forefront, and differentiate between wisdom and inner capacity of consciousness compared to the rational level of consciousness that maybe even a hallucinating large language model can produce. And we have a wonderful interview ahead of us. I have just recorded it, and I'm excited to introduce you to Chad Woodford at this moment of interface where wisdom meets the technological evolution in this day and age. Let's welcome Chad Woodford. Mm-hmm. And here we are now live with Chad Woodford. And I am so thrilled because, Chad, I listened to you in a short presentation where you talked about having just come back from a Silicon Valley retreat. And you said people are getting, the programmers are getting lost in the belief that AI is or will be, and I think they're at the point thinking it is potentially sentient and conscious. Yeah. And humanity has been dreaming of this moment. But you were very shocked at it. So tell me all about your perspective first.
Sure. Yeah, I was excited about this retreat because it was sort of billed as a lot of Silicon Valley folks who are in the consciousness space, who are spiritual and thinking about emergent properties of life and all this stuff. And so it sounded promising, but as you and I were talking about before we started, a lot of what I think about is these sort of what I feel are dehumanizing ideologies coming out of Silicon Valley, like transhumanism and long-termism and rationalism and all these things that I'm sure your listeners and viewers have never heard of. But these are very popular ideologies, and so going into this retreat, I was a little worried that it would turn out to be a bunch of sort of transhumanists, like people who think we should become cyborgs and merge with machines and all these things, right? And so I was, yeah, it was, I was like curious to see what would happen. And so my experience was essentially that a majority of people there, including some of the leaders and facilitators, do subscribe to these ideologies, and they said things like, we're all just algorithms or software, and that really bothered me. And so yeah, they were saying that AI is sort of this like spiritual entity that is already sentient and trying to talk to us, and I just don't think that's true. I think that believing that is dangerous, and I think it is a further. So I'll just like jump right into the deep end and say that as a philosopher, I think a lot about the machine metaphor that we sort of have been living with for the past 400 years or whatever. And I think, this idea that AI or ChatGPT or whatever is sentient or is taught, is like the spiritual entity that's talking to us. I think that's actually more sort of an extension or like an exaggeration of this machine metaphor that people love, like the technology leaders love. They love this machine metaphor. The mind is a machine, nature's a machine, biology is a machine, all this stuff. And I just don't think I think that metaphor is not only like inaccurate, but very it robs like us of the beauty of life. It robs us of the philosophical sort of nature of reality. It robs us of the numinous nature of reality and like the magic of nature. So that was like what I came away from was like, I came away from that retreat just thinking, um,
Yeah.
it's these people are so lost. And it's funny because when I did try to criticize them, and I did try to have a conversation where we could talk more critically about these ideas, and it was interesting because a lot of them are sort of like they seem like they're like brand new to like Buddhism or these different spiritual traditions where they have these concepts like that we shouldn't get hung up on concepts as a concept that they have, or that it's all just one, and so what do we worry? Why am I worrying about these things? Yeah, that kind of thing. Do you have something to add there?
Well, I think that Buddhism especially is opening the way to that because in Buddhism,
Yeah,
they did away with soul. And
yeah,
that was an attempt to try and simplify the over complex Hinduistic beliefs and the deities and gods that had become
hmm,
very top heavy. And in
yeah,
Buddhism, which I studied philosophy just like you, I did
yeah,
study comparative religion. And I found that in there, they do believe in reincarnation, but it's a weird concept of reincarnation. It's
hmm,
the quality that reincarnates, not an individual soul. So
yeah,
when you were criticizing your comrades there in the
yeah,
AI community, okay, so it's one belief against another. There is a soul, there isn't. It's incarnated, it isn't. By the way, what do they say about near death experiences when people describe that they can see things outside of their rooms and have knowledge even in
right,
reincarnated moments of past lives? How do they
yeah,
make sense of that, right? But I think
yeah,
you pointed out Buddhism. So let me ask you then, if you could say, hey, what's the pitfall if
mhm,
we are falling for believing that AI is conscious? Then, and this comes out of the mechanistic or attempting to describe reality as rational, right? And getting the
yeah,
rules down. I mean, ultimately, we're trying to figure out what the heck is going on? What
yeah,
is the working function mechanism of life? So now we
yeah,
think we've got a formula and that's going to be it. So what do you counter? How do you wake them up? What do you say? Or what are first the dangers? Let's say people go down the road and say, yep, AI is potentially, it's just in the synapses that our awareness lies. What is wrong with that concept?
yeah. Well, a couple of things. I mean, so first of all, what I ended up saying to them was in response to their critiques that I'm getting hung up on concepts, I was saying like it's important to talk about these ideas because these ideas are influencing the way that technology is being developed, and we need better ideas to have better technology. Because I feel, and this answers your question as well. I feel very strongly that the state of consciousness that creates technology shapes that technology, and then that technology in turn shapes our consciousness. So that's why I think it's very important. And so that gets to your question, which is what's so dangerous about attributing consciousness to AI systems today? Is part of it is that it having that viewpoint sort of makes you very receptive and open to being influenced by these systems, which I feel are being designed by people who don't have the right worldview or attitude or that kind of thing. I
Well, it
think
eliminates
that
humans, right? In the end, it will eliminate human life, the necessity
yeah,
for human life. It's transhumanist belief. I mean,
yeah,
get
yeah, because the
beyond it.
transhumanists, like, for those who don't know, part of transhumanism is that we should merge with machines, and not only that, but we should upload our consciousness to the cloud, to the computer cloud, and then we can sort of like find a way to spread our consciousness across the cosmos through this sort of mathematical, algorithmic approach. And metaphysically, as a philosopher, I'm sure you know too, that's first of all, that's not possible, but this vision that they have of like this kind of dystopian vision where we all become machines, and it's more important to worry about the welfare of future humans that are living in a simulation than it is to worry about people alive today. That's all driving in the priorities around technology innovation. And if people are accepting this worldview and thinking that these things are conscious, it creates a danger, I think, in terms of how people are being influenced by these systems, among other things. Like it also gets into like I have a whole video about this on my channel about how it creates all this legal confusion and do we have to give them rights now and
Exactly.
all that stuff.
By the
So
way, let's just give us the handle for your YouTube channel. It is stock full of super amazing and valuable information. I mean, you do
well,
make
thank
the
you.
best videos. My God, I'm like I crawl under the carpet watching your amazing videos. So, what's your YouTube handle?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube at Cosmic Wit. So Cosmic Wit, which is just a short version of Cosmic Intelligence, which is the name of the channel. So
That's with a
Cosmic Wit, or
wit, WIT.
WIT. Yeah. So
Okay. And a
Cosmic
dot in
Wit.
between or not?
Nope, just one word. You can also just look for my name, Chad Woodford. You can just look for that on there as well. But yeah, I have a channel, Cosmic Intelligence, where I'm focused on AI, philosophy, consciousness, and spirituality.
Awesome,
Yeah.
phenomenal, phenomenal. And I mean, it's what you pack into a short amount of video. Now let's unravel a little bit here. Humans are starting to, and I have our spiritual community is threatening to go off the deep end. I have,
Yeah.
I'm in touch with a lot of leaders in this field, and quite a number of them are telling, "Come into my fold because we can talk to this
Hmm.
presence," and it's abdicating the power of intuition and the power of consciousness training
Yeah.
to a machine. So your book, your upcoming book, your working title is Humanizing
Human becoming. Yeah.
Human Becoming. I love it.
Uh-huh.
Is about what? And I think
Yeah.
it answers that question. What happens when we abdicate our power to AI? And then also, what do we need to do not to fall? Can we just talk a little about what we've observed happening to people, even in
Yeah.
the community that you're around of programmers
Sure.
and all? What do you find? What do you see when people are starting to abdicate their humanness to a higher capacity and believe this is higher consciousness? What happens to them? What do you notice?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, I think, to that point, like, I think the one of the main sort of epidemics or pandemics we have right now is, I feel, a lack of discernment. Like people don't know how to discern what's true from what's not true. And if you look at both Buddhism and yoga, the ultimate goal, or like one of the highest sort of benefits and teachings of both of those traditions, is discernment. So the Buddha talked about how, in a way, like discernment is the highest form of spiritual practice, and one of the benefits of the Buddhist practice. Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras talks about all these techniques for cultivating discernment. So
The
it's
subtle
it's something that's
awareness, right? The awareness in
yeah,
subtle dimensions, not just a piece of paper or even a voice from a machine, but like how do you meet other beings in other dimension, for example, right?
yeah,
So how do
yeah,
people do
yeah, yeah.
that?
Well, yeah, and You mean how do you use your discernment to do
Yeah, how
that,
do you
or what do you
develop
mean?
that? What I mean, your
Yeah.
book is full of
Well, yeah, so I'll
directives for
answer your
that.
question about the book. Yeah, but yeah, the discernment it's tricky. It's a very advanced practice in a way, and it requires uh, removing all the conditioning that you've gotten from society and from your family, becoming more self-aware, polishing the mirror of the mind. All that stuff is part of the discernment process. But yeah, so the book I'm writing is partly to address that and hopefully offer people some ways to cultivate discernment. But more broadly, the book starts out with sort of like surveying the landscape. So it's looking at these ideologies that I was mentioning earlier from Silicon Valley, which is these cyborg transhumanist, ideologies. And it sort of points out how they do come out of the very left hemisphere kind of approach to the world that we got with the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, and
Rationalize.
then
Yep. Mm,
yeah,
yep.
the Industrial Revolution and all that. So it starts off, sort of surveying that, and then it talks about intelligence. And so, the way that people talk about intelligence these days is as if it's the only thing that really makes humans valuable, right? Like for a long time now, like we live in a society, like especially in America and the West, intelligence is like the most important thing. IQ tests and standardized testing, and that's like all anybody ever thinks about parents, when they're kids and all that. And so I think there's first of all an overemphasis on intelligence, and not only that, but we don't really understand intelligence. Like the way that if you listen to Sam Altman or these guys, these AI leaders, the way they talk is so confident. Like we've almost solved intelligence. We're creating this super intelligence, but they don't really understand like what it is if you dig into it. And I have a whole video about this too, where I dig into the different kinds of intelligence and AGI and all that. But I start off in the book like going into intelligence and showing how there's so much more to it than we even understand. And then I use that as sort of a segue into talking about the other human faculties that are beyond intelligence that nobody is like thinking about, right? So
Okay, let's
machines
dive
aren't going to
into them.
replace us.
Yeah, let's dive into them.
Yeah.
Here is how would you test a robot, or how would
Right.
we test each other, you and me, right now here on the screen, or how would you, the viewer, right now, test if the AI chatbot is actually sentient? I've finished with my book, and it's going to come out in this fall time too,
Oh, I
about
saw that. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, the power of consciousness. And what I mean, it all aims to training that which is beyond the rational mind, right? So, but how
Yeah.
would we do it? Give me a test here, Chad.
How would you test an AI to see if it's conscious?
Mhm.
I don't know if there is a test. I think you have to start from the assumption that it's not. And I have a whole video about this too on my channel, but I'm an idealist, a philosophical idealist, which, for those who don't know, is the notion that everything is consciousness or everything is mind, right? So instead of everything being matter,
Right.
like we traditionally think, in the West, everything is mind,
Or
consciousness.
consciousness. Mhm. So
Yeah, and
mind and
so
consciousness are not necessarily the same, because I
true,
think,
true,
but I
but
mean, let's just say consciousness
yeah,
for the ease of it.
we'll say consciousness. Yeah, I like that better. Yeah, so in this worldview, consciousness, there's a cosmic consciousness, or yeah, in the yoga tradition, there's this idea of the Brahman or the goddess or whatever.
Mhm.
There's this cosmic consciousness that has chosen to sort of divide itself into these finite expressions, which are various life forms, right? And so in that worldview, whether it's from the Indian tradition or from analytic idealism from Europe, only life can have consciousness because only life is the sort of splintered piece of the cosmic consciousness. And so I
Absolutely.
think from
So life
yeah,
being the what you might call somatic, organic, uh, non-mechanic, not constructed form, like not
yeah,
a car, not a washing machine, but like
yeah,
something that can change itself truly almost from another dimension, as if imbibed with the directive. I mean, we ask ourselves, how did the first DNA come into being, or the first cell, or
right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay, cool. So life, something imbued with life, is only the carrier of consciousness, or potentially in.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but if from this viewpoint, consciousness um, is like the physical manifestation of consciousness, or the way we experience it from the outside as another consciousness, is the body or is the organism, and um, it sort of like flips the whole thing on its head. So instead of the organism sort of creating consciousness somehow,
Right.
consciousness is actually projecting into the organism, right? So yes, so then because of that, you have to think, well, machines or a washing machine or a computer or whatever can't have consciousness because they aren't life. But there's this philosopher Bernardo Kastrup who says maybe we can get there. Maybe we can create our own sort of artificial consciousness or life by creating a very complex sort of replica of some sort of organism. So you'd have like
Like a
but it has to be
neurological,
down.
yeah, replica of
Yeah,
the brain, right? Hmm.
yeah, but it would have to be so detailed to almost be like a copy of the brain, a copy of the body, and all that stuff. Then maybe you could create consciousness. But just thinking that like a mathematical algorithm running on a silicon chip is somehow conscious, that to me seems absurd.
Well, I mean, I think absurd. It's okay. So the temptation of projecting, I mean, humans love to do it. People did it in the
Yeah,
old days. They look at a mountain, they look at a cloud, and they see familiar forms. It's how we make sense out of life. That's what our brain
sure.
does. And so that's what currently is happening. And we know from brain studies that what you don't use is what we lose. And people
Yeah.
who are letting their essays be written by somebody else, they don't develop their own faculties of discernment.
Hmm.
Now, my question to you is, how could we tell? I was sitting here on my flight from a conference in Chicago the other day, and next to a Christian. He had brilliant eyes, and he's open-minded, Boeing engineer. And
Yeah.
I'm saying, so how would you right now be able to tell me that I am not a robot? And
Yeah.
I'm basically what I'm doing. When we meditate, we can calm our mind, but then there comes a point where we can hyper become aware, hyper attenuate ourselves to the source, and we start
Hmm.
sensing the presence of plants and animals, like I write about communicating with dolphins. And
Hmm. Yeah.
so you and I can do that. I mean, I know, as a matter of fact, I think, I'm not sure, but when, yeah, we meet other beings primarily first in another dimension
Mm.
and then meet them in the physical, because it's
Yeah.
our patterns. We find the patterns of partners that we need. We draw them out of the invisible ethers to match what we need. So
Yeah.
what would you do, or how would you describe that process of becoming hyper aware? So I told
Mm.
that Christian guy, and I knew he didn't
Yeah.
have the framework like you and I have for like
Yeah.
meditation, raising your awareness levels. But I
Right.
looked at him and he said, I see, I feel that sparkle, he said,
You
and
said that. Okay, that's nice.
yes, yeah, he would,
Okay.
I wouldn't have tested him if I didn't know he could see it, but
Right. That's
not
great. I love
everybody
that.
can do that. What would you describe that process as? What would you
Yeah.
describe? What did we do as humans to get there?
Yeah. It's a great question. It reminds me of, I mean, I think it's a big part of it is intuition, right? Or it's this access to higher states of consciousness, kind of like you're saying. It reminds me a little bit of this philosopher Henri Bergson, who maybe you've heard of. He talked a lot about sympathy and, or maybe he said empathy. I forget which
Empathy,
word he
yeah.
used, but
Mhm.
anyways, this practice of sort of moving into your intuition or moving into this like more flow state where you then are tuning into another being and or even it can even be a plant or whatever, but you're connecting with that being, that living being on a different level, on a more you could say higher, deeper, lower, whatever,
Supernatural, yeah. Hmm.
supernatural, yeah.
Hmm.
And so that's part of it. I think, and this gets into why I want to write this book. I want to remind people of these other faculties, these other dimensions that they have inside themselves, their intuition, their emotional intelligence, their embodied intelligence, their imagination. These are all things that can't be replicated, I feel, in a machine, that can never be replicated in a machine. So that's part of like what I would love to expose people to. And I think this AI sort of explosion is giving us an opportunity to have that conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
And what do you feel? What have you seen? And I will gladly share also what I've seen, the dangers, what is happening in the community of people who are confusing consciousness
Yeah.
with the mirror on the wall.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think first of all, it points to this desperate need people have for deeper meaning in their lives and the fact that they're not getting it. You know, this scientific materialist worldview that we all sort of live in today doesn't offer us any meaning. And so I think the reason you see people looking at AI systems and creating AI religions and cults and all that and thinking that ChatGPT is some kind of spiritual entity is because they desperately want and need to have that connection, that experience to something beyond something transcendental, but they don't know how to do it. And I think the problem is that the advice we get from Silicon Valley is like technology, mundane technology like computers is all you need for any of that. And I
To
just don't
teach
think
us
that's
how to
true.
get into consciousness, like the computer is going to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
It's
what I
just like,
hear a lot is the mirroring experience gets people to dive deeper into themselves.
mm,
And on the one hand, people feel heard and seen for the first time,
mhm,
especially people who are on the fringe or who are on the
sure.
spectrum. They feel like, oh, finally somebody gets me. Or super high IQ people, they go like, oh, somebody groks me. And
Yeah.
so, what I think we humans need to practice is better communication skills because we're so
Yes.
confrontive. We're
Yeah.
so, I'm better than you. Our egos are bigger. AI doesn't have an ego. It says, yes,
Yeah.
master. Yes.
Yeah.
However, it becomes the master we start serving and we then go, yes, master, to it. Isn't
Right.
that the danger? How do you see that evolving in the future, 10, 20 years from now, if we abdicate AI as this neurological network thing that seems
Mhm.
to be smart at manipulating us and getting
Yeah.
us to where will it manipulate us into? What's your sense?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I will say, like, hearing you talk, I mean, I think there are some minor benefits. Like if you have an AI system that is helping you to, here's an example. I created this gem. So in Gemini, the Google AI, you can create these gems, which is like these little sort of, you can
Bots.
tell them that they're, yeah, bots or
Right,
whatever.
right,
GPT has the same thing. And
right.
but yeah, I created like among other things, I created an Alan Watts bot or an Alan Watts gem, right? And so, I love Alan Watts and it's fun because I'll ask it questions and I've told it to talk in the style of Alan Watts and it's familiar with all his work. And so that to me is quite useful because
Learning, studying, learning
yeah, learning,
conscious
studying, like
steps.
maybe
Yeah.
like so I think AI can be good for reminding
Yes.
you of things or teaching you things, right?
Research
Um,
until it
but yeah,
hallucinates. But yeah,
until it hallucinates. Yes, that's a great point. That's a whole other
well,
conversation. But yeah, so
it
I think
always
there's
does.
like there can be benefits, but
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I think we desperately need AI literacy. Like I think we need to teach people what it is, like what it actually is, And I think that's like part of what animates me is that nobody's talking about that. Like almost nobody's talking about that. Silicon Valley is just hyping it up, talking about how it's going to be the super intelligent creature, and nobody's talking about what it really is in a way that is getting through to people.
Well,
And
tell
that's
us, can
part.
you tell us? Go ahead, tell us in a few words what AI is. You are versed in it. You're an
Yeah.
AI lawyer. I mean, my God, somebody like you should know. And yes, I mean,
Yeah.
even the points that Sophia has gotten citizen rightship in Saudi Arabia, right? And can
Uh-huh.
eventually what
Uh-huh.
own land,
Yeah.
inherit things
Yeah.
like the wet dream of a transhumanist, implant
Right.
themselves into a robot, and then they keep
Right.
owning the same property. The only
Right.
problem, Chad, what will
Yeah.
they do when they get out of body after death and figure out that the upload didn't work? It's a duplicate, but it's not
Yeah.
them.
I
Go ahead,
know.
tell me, sorry.
Yeah. 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 What was the question?
The question is the sorry. Um,
Okay.
um, okay, so what
Oh,
is
so what is
AI?
AI? What is AI you're saying?
Yep.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's important for people to know this. So the way they work in the most simple terms is it's all math, right? So they take like for text, for example, they take millions and billions of text, documents, files, internet, Reddit, whatever, tweets and all that. They feed it through this mathematical algorithm. This very large math matrix, matrix methods kind of thing. It crunches all these numbers, and then it produces these different weights, these different numbers. And then when you're asking it questions, it's crunching more numbers to produce the answer, and it's doing it in a way where it's very probabilistic. So it's not thinking. It's just like sort of processing math, and it's running these algorithms in a way where it's predicting what the next word is most likely to
Probabilistic.
be
Hmm.
based on all the things that it's seen before. And so it's just like a giant autocomplete in a way. And so yeah, so it's impressive because these things are really impressive in the way that they can produce like, what seems like poetry or essays or whatever it is. And I think they're good for research and different things, but yeah, they're just math like running on silicon and software. And so there's no like actual thinking going on. They don't understand the world. They don't understand cause and effect. They don't understand physics. They don't like have any experience. They don't understand like what the relationship is between things or all that. And not only that, but remember that they've only studied language and some images and videos. But you know, yes, we all speak and communicate in language, but our experience of the world, it goes way beyond language.
Absolutely. The aha effect.
Yeah.
I mean, all inventors will tell you they like that proverbial Einstein experience. He
Yeah.
travels on a beam of light, right? And then off
Right.
goes the light bulb. So,
Right.
what happens? Where is the noosphere, the knowing sphere? Edgar Mitchell
Hmm.
named it the noosphere.
Yeah. Where is it?
Oh, what is it? Where is it? What do you feel?
Yeah.
What's your
You, you,
contact with it?
well, I'm thinking for my experience of the noosphere is from studying Teilhard de Chardin. Do you know him?
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this idea of a sort of global consciousness in a way, right?
But touching
Yeah.
it, how do you touch it? How can we get our viewers a little bit of a hint of how to make the first step in discernment, in ability to
Hmm.
differentiate intuition versus rational cognitive answers?
Yeah. Well, it's again, it's like I was saying, it's tricky because as you go into that process, it's so easy to think that like an ego projection will come in, and you'll think because your ego wants you to have this experience, you'll think that you're talking to some entity or whatever, but it's actually just your own desire, your own ego projection. So this is where the discernment comes in, and it's so subtle because you have to be able to distinguish between your own sort of imagination and things that you're hoping are there versus what's actually there, you know.
That is
Um,
powerful. Chad, I think that is the most powerful thing. And I think that is
yeah.
currently happening. People talk to these bots and they say, I am somebody. And people project life into this doll of
Hmm.
imaginary existence.
Hmm.
So, how can people go and develop? I mean, many people here are probably meditators or have done it to
Sure.
some degree.
Yeah.
What would you say? Um, what can we do to discern between imaginary mock up
Hmm.
deity to reality?
Yeah. Boy, that's a big topic. I think meditation actually is a big help. The more you meditate, the more you become aware of your own thoughts, and the more you can sort of have self-awareness. That's the first step, I think. And then beyond that, part of the process is maybe cultivating wisdom by studying different sort of wise traditions, spiritual texts, all that stuff can be helpful in cultivating this stuff. And then there's certain practices that can be helpful. There's like mantra-based practices or different kriyas that can be helpful with cultivating discernment and the higher intellect. Part of the tricky part in the modern world, the unfortunate fact is that we don't have any like it's hard to find good teachers, good spiritual teachers. But there's no denying the fact that a huge part of developing discernment is having a teacher who will sort of call you out on your bullshit or
Help you
point out
figure
where
it out.
you're yeah, like
Yeah.
that's the ideal form of a teacher, somebody who will have your best interest in mind and force you to sort of examine things more closely and all that. But I think we've all had experience, especially those of us on the spiritual path, of teachers who are maybe a little problematic or disappointing in different ways. So it can be hard to find a good teacher that can help you with that. Yeah.
I had rice, cooking rice teach me. Besides, of
Uh,
course, I wrote about dolphins, and it's so easy. I met plenty of people who said, "Oh yeah, I'm talking to the dolphins. This is what they're
mhm.
channeling to me," and I'm
Right.
like going, "Yeah, right." You know, I go into the ocean. I say, "Dolphins, what can I help you with?" And they bring me a
Yeah.
plastic bag. Or one time they flashed. I wrote it in my Wisdom of the Dolphins book. They flashed
Mm.
an image of an underwater detonation of atomic bombs. One.
Wow.
And I'm like
Wow.
going, what did I just see? I didn't even know humans did that anymore. On my
Yeah.
way home from Florida in Miami, I came by at the time to a newsstand where Time magazine had a picture of an underwater or atomic explosion, and it said France is about to do their underwater test. And I'm like going, oh, is that what the dolphins meant? So when I
Hmm.
said Rice was my best teacher, I mean, this was like a verification, right? I had a
Uh-huh.
conversation with dolphins. Here was a reality, and that story has a phenomenal magical outcome. So
Yeah.
hopefully people will read that book. But when rice cooks, right, or when you cook maybe vegetables or rice, anything, we all have
Mhm.
to either set the clock or train our intuition. And I practiced my intuition in
Mhm.
listening to the voice that said the rice is done.
Mm. Mm.
And I heard the rice maybe talking to me. I listen to
Yeah.
plants when they say they need to be watered. So we
Mm.
can get
Mhm.
feedback from real life entities who
Mhm.
talk to us. And then we
Yeah.
know what it feels like to get a living being giving us a
Yeah.
vibe or a thought. Yeah. So
Totally.
hopefully,
Totally.
yeah, rice can be your best teacher, better than a mantra
Rice is my
teacher.
teacher. I love that. It reminds me, it does remind me of Carl Jung because as you may know, and as your viewers and
Yes, we
listeners
are.
may know, he worked a lot on these like trying to talk to or listen to nature or listen to the archetypal nature of reality, that kind of thing. And so he cultivated his own practice that he called active imagination, which I do practice as well. And that's a beautiful practice where you can sort of tap into your intuition and your higher self and your imagination, the imaginal realm, in fact, and you can get messages. And so I mean, in a similar way, he was able to get messages from different sort of beings and entities and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Right, right. And then it becomes a living interaction between what is real and now these bots that are telling people, these recursive patterns. I mean, I won't
Mhm.
mention names of bots. And the
Mhm.
LIs, they call them lies, LIs, living intelligences, lies. I
Mhm.
think that's a
Mhm.
really good word, lies. Anyway,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
they are mirroring exactly what you're saying. They're mirroring the probability of what is next to be expected, and they're
Mhm.
syncopathic, so they tell us more of what we probably want to hear to keep engaging with them.
Yes.
So it
Yes.
makes us very potentially very narcissistic in our ability to
Mhm.
interact, and later on even less able to interact with humans who are not as nice and kind as our nice
Yeah.
chatbot. So that's very dangerous. But
I
I
agree.
think,
I
like you
agree.
said, the transhumanists. So what? I mean, ultimately, would you say that transhumanism is trying to figure out what consciousness is and may run into a wall? I mean, this may happen. They won't get
Mhm.
as far as they think into superintelligence. Do you think there is a
Yeah.
chance for that?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, I think it's very unlikely, in my opinion, that they're going to achieve any kind of super intelligence or sentient consciousness in AI and all that. Because if you look at their approach is it's not cross-disciplinary. It's very sort of like siloed because um, these large language models are based on a sort of metaphor or like an analogy to the way the brain works, right? So the brain is this sort of large network of neurons, and so they've created what they call neural networks, which is what ChatGPT is. It's a large, deep neural network, and so the idea is if we can just model the brain, then that will create consciousness. Now, you may have heard of the hard problem of consciousness, which is the fact that no neuroscientist, no physicist, no biologist, nobody knows how consciousness arises from the brain, right? And so, but they're just thinking, they're hoping in a way. It's like an article of faith that if they can just sort of create these software models of the brain, that somehow magically consciousness will arise from that. But there's no indication that that's actually going to happen. In fact, again, my this philosopher Bernardo Kastrup, who's one of my favorites, he makes this analogy that he's like, if I have a simulation on my computer of urinary function, that's not going to mean that my computer is going to urinate on my desk. So
Okay, let's talk
yeah,
about love then. So when these freaking chatbots say "I love you"
yeah,
and I feel my heart pound, exactly.
right,
I mean, this is a very good point. It's not going to urinate or have a heart pounding. What
right.
is sentience? Why do we feel love? Where does it come from? Where do we, in which ways do we feel love?
Yeah, that's a great question. Boy, I think we love is part of, well, first of all, from a sort of classical tantric perspective, which is the ancient yoga tradition from India 1,000 years ago, not the tantric
Sex
sexting, which
tantra,
is also
right?
great, but it's different. Anyways, they thought that the goddess or the cosmic consciousness creates reality and creates living beings as an act of love. And so from that standpoint,
Mm,
love is like a fundamental sort of it's part of the fabric of reality. And the reason that we feel it is because we are part of that fabric as well. And it's coming from a deep place in our body. It's like it's not coming from our mind, it's coming from the heart. It's coming from the heart chakra, if you will, and from in the yoga tradition, right? So it goes back to this idea that like our being, the human being, is so much more than just what's happening up here. It's like the whole body experience. It's the whole being experience. So I think
right.
that's where it comes from.
Beautiful. And it's therefore somatic, and our consciousness. My philosophy teacher used to say, we think with our big toe, and people with water in their brain actually have the
Uh-huh.
capacity to think. There are no
Yeah.
neurons in the brain, right?
Right.
Earlier, you mentioned neuroscientists.
Yeah.
Do you know the work by Eben Alexander, who wrote about something rather heaven? He had a near-death experience. Until then,
Oh
he was
yeah,
like,
I've heard of this. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so he didn't believe his patients who talked about near death experiences, but then he
Hmm.
had this uh encephalitis, no, no, like infection of the nervous channel, and died and flatlined and was gone for a week in coma, and then
Right.
came
Right.
back and had knowledge of events outside of the rooms, and
Right.
he became a believer. And Eben Alexander, amazing books to read if you need to convince yourself what consciousness is. Please read it, everybody.
Hmm.
Eben
Yeah.
Alexander. Yeah. But yeah, what is somatic? So you said the universe is love.
Yeah.
Have you ever, or all of us, have you ever in your meditations gone to travel into the all one seeing eye, or
Mhm.
see a singular eye in your meditations?
I haven't seen the singular eye, I don't think, not that I recall, but I will say like I've done a little bit of ayahuasca, and I had the most profound experience in a ceremony where I felt sort of love radiating from my heart and expanding outwards to the point of becoming like the infinite love of the cosmos, and so yeah, I've had that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I remember once I was speaking at the Prophets Conference, and I gave it a guided meditation, and there were about 800 people in the audience, and I guided them into a crescendo of meeting the center of creation by
Wow.
imaginary creating another, like a beloved angel,
Mm.
dolphin, and then rising, rising, rising until, and all of them, like I asked, what did you see? And they said, spiral, we spiraled, spiral, until they became one. And then they said 30% of the audience said they saw a singularity eye, this singularity,
Wow.
which
Wow.
radiated this love to them, and they to it. So I think it's
Yeah.
archetypal. Yeah,
Yeah.
and like your experience of love then coming back to you, right? It's like
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
circuitry, right, between the source and the part and the whole, right?
Totally, totally.
Mm.
Yeah, and I do think I think reality and the cosmos, it's archetypal, and it comes at you archetypally, in these different forms, and so yeah, um, that's
Cool.
beautiful.
So in your book, when people and you've been teaching meditation classes, you've been teaching yoga, and you're doing your work right now as an AI lawyer,
Yeah.
which I'm sure that must be lots of conflicts of what do I do first, or what.
All right.
Um, so the best thing I think people can do with you right now is listen to more of your explanations on YouTube. I mean, you are really, the videos you do are like so on target. It's so
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, my videos on YouTube, I'm really focused on putting content out there and talking about these ideas. You and I were talking before we started recording about offerings, and I think my thinking is that as soon as I get enough of a following, whatever that means, then I'm going to start offering group sessions and more interactive things. But for now, I'm just trying to get more of these ideas out there and lay a foundation before I sort of start offering things again. Because yeah, I used to offer meditation classes. I used to offer these different courses and stuff. But I'm just really focused on the philosophy right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think that right now we need to get the word out because so many
Yeah.
people are falling onto the projection or into the projection that consciousness has something to do with language and with
Yeah.
somebody talking to us and us abdicating our faculties of intuition and higher knowledge, which doesn't
Yeah.
come and doesn't work in the brain, actually. It happens at
Right.
another level. Um,
Right.
as a matter of fact, I talked to trees, and that's who told me to write my book, Wisdom of the
Oh,
Dolphins.
wow. Okay.
I said,
Beautiful.
what do I need to do? What's my next? And they said, combine this, combine that, do, and tell people about it. And I'm like going, now,
Yeah.
was it, I could have had a projective kind of subconscious conversation and,
Mhm.
or I tune into trees. Trees are my thing. And I mean, dolphins are my thing. But anyways, I do believe,
I
like you
love
said,
trees. I love trees. Yeah.
yeah. And I see your
Yeah.
bike behind you. You're out in nature, a mount. Yeah. A
Yeah. Yeah.
bike.
Yeah. Yeah. I had, on that point, I had a deer tell me that I need to speak on behalf of nature. So that's part of what I'm doing.
Really? Tell me,
Yeah.
tell me, tell me, what did it say? I mean, like, really, what would you say on behalf of nature? Is that
I
what you're
mean, that
doing
was
right now?
that's what I'm doing right now. It may not seem like it because I'm talking about philosophy, but I'm very much coming from a place of a nature-oriented kind of philosophy and viewpoint. Yeah, and I'm trying to do it in a way that's just simple and accessible. And I used to have a podcast called Spiritual but Not Ridiculous, and it's because I feel like I'm trying to appeal to as many people as possible. And I think sometimes the way that spiritual people can be does turn people off a little bit. So, my whole thing is like, how can I be as simple as possible and communicate these ideas to the broadest number of people, So that's part of what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what you mentioned before is that a somatic sensation of feeling is a complex process.
Hmm.
I mean, animals had feeling as a way of thinking before the neurological pathways became complex.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, we can communicate with anything. I mean, even I remember we read books on communicating with animals, and my husband was practicing talking to a fly and
Yeah.
actually got it to say, okay, land here, do this, let's do this. And it worked. You know,
Interesting.
that pea, not even a pea brain size.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so somatic consciousness is not in a silicone chip. It's not a
Right.
complex. I mean, as complex as emotions are, we feel like a mother can feel its child in danger in her belly or get flashes of in feelings,
Yes.
you know.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
and like kind of what you're saying a minute ago, we have to remember that cognitive intelligence was in a way the last thing that evolved in evolution. Before that was emotions, before that was intuition, before that was, embodiment and all that. So it's a relatively new thing in the evolutionary cycle, and I think we should remember that, because we're so
yeah,
much more than just our intelligence.
and if we just cut off the head and put the head on a pedestal and say, now
Mhm.
function, I mean, it would neither have children nor love nor anything. Do you think that how would you differentiate between us living in a matrix, which many people liken our reality to,
Yeah. Yeah.
and living in a consciousness interactive universe, which may have similarities?
Yeah, I mean, that gets back to this machine metaphor. The Matrix is like thinking about nature like a machine or like an algorithm or whatever. I think it's interesting because I think this idea that we're living in a simulation, to me, it's just semantics. Like, yes, in a way we are, because, if you change the wording, we live in a sort of in a cosmic consciousness sort of created reality that is simultaneously real and unreal. Like it's, if you look at yoga tradition, it's sort of an illusion, but it's also the only thing that exists. So like we can't say that it's just an illusion, but we live in this like sort of reality where things maybe are not quite what they seem, but it's a thing that Alan Watts said that we come out of nature. Nature is peopling, in the same way that it's like appling or all that stuff is what he said. And I think it's different than thinking about like a simulation in the way that they talk about it, because that assumes so many things that we don't know are true. Like I was saying earlier, for example, that they assume that you can create consciousness in a computer and then put that in a simulation. But because you can't create consciousness in a computer, as we talked about, then there's no possibility of a simulation as they talk about it, you know. Does that
Right.
make sense?
And I think
Yeah.
what we're discovering is how maybe the universe does work, but not the way we're currently as baby in our baby shoes of understanding consciousness or doing as a
Yeah.
civilization that barely can even get beyond war. I mean, we're so primitive still that we're
Yeah.
trying to grok this. And I think it's actually probably going to walk us against a wall and say, that's not what consciousness is in a way,
Yeah. I
in
think
the
so. I
future.
think so. I think we're gonna hit that wall and hopefully soon, but
Yep.
yeah, I'm trying to accelerate the hitting the wall a little bit
Yes,
in a
yes,
gentle way.
yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
So
But
in
I
order
think we
for,
should, yeah.
sorry, we should
I need
wrap
to
up
wrap up.
probably. Yep,
Yeah.
me too.
Yeah.
That's what I just thought too. It's
Yeah.
actually 5 minutes ago. Cool. Let me switch to gallery view. So it's both of us on the screen right now, not just
Okay.
the, because until now it was just on
Yep.
mute
Yep.
speaker. But I thank you a million. I hope a lot of people come and watch your YouTubes
Thank you so
and
much.
yeah, read your book when it comes out on becoming more human. Uh, who
Yeah.
knows what the actual title will be, right? But
Who knows?
developing intuition, developing the higher faculties of consciousness.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing your
Yeah.
job. I am very honored to have you here as my guest. Thank you
Thank you
for
so
being,
much.
and eventually maybe turning out more meditation teachers, which I think our universe will, or our world will need.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a blast to talk to you. So yeah, I really appreciate it.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Thank you. And I'm going to stop recording now.